In the heart of the galaxy, where ancient species once held supreme power, humanity was dismissed as nothing more than a reckless child playing with fire. For 15 years, Earth struggled for respect in the Stellar Alliance, until one moment shattered their patience. Commander Sarah Chun, representing humanity, had just witnessed the final insult. The Zephyrian counselor, in his arrogance, dismissed humanity's greatest achievement. With a single defiant decision, Sarah walked away, leaving the once mighty alliance trembling in disbelief. But as the galaxy unraveled without the strength of humanity's support, the Council would soon realize their mistake, and the cost would be more than they ever anticipated. The final insult commander, Sarah Chun, stood in the Grand Chamber of the Stellar Alliance Council, her hands clenched behind her back as she watched the holographic displays showing the crisis unfolding across the galaxy. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering, floating in space at the neutral zone between 5 different star systems. Massive windows showed the swirling colors of nearby nebulae, while the council seats formed a perfect circle around the central speaking platform. But today, the beauty of the chamber felt cold and unwelcoming. Sarah had been Earth's representative to the Alliance for 3 years, and in that time, she had watched humanity be treated like the galaxy's youngest child. Every proposal was met with condescending smiles. Every success was dismissed as beginner's luck. Every failure was used as proof that humans weren't ready for real galactic responsibility. The crisis had started 6 weeks ago. A strange plague had broken out in the outer colonies, affecting multiple species. The disease moved fast, shutting down entire planets within days. Traditional medicine couldn't touch it. The Alliance's oldest and most experienced doctors were baffled. But Dr. Marcus Webb, a human scientist working on Earth's newest research station, had developed a potential cure. The problem was getting the medicine to the affected worlds. The outer colonies were at the edge of known space, surrounded by dangerous radiation fields and unstable wormholes. The Alliance's ships would take months to reach them, and by then, millions would be dead. But humanity had a solution, Doctor. Webb had also been working on quantum drive technology, a new way of traveling through space that could cut journey times by 90%. His ships could reach the plague-affected worlds in days, not months. The technology was new and untested on a large scale, but it had worked perfectly in dozens of smaller missions. Sarah had presented the plan to the Council 3 days ago. Use human quantum drive ships to deliver the cure to the outer colonies. Save millions of lives. Prove that humanity deserved to be treated as equals in the Alliance. It should have been simple. Instead, she had been listening to 3 days of debate about whether humans could be trusted with such an important mission. The human proposal is typical of their species, said Counselor THYSS, his energy form pulsing with what Sarah had learned to recognize as dismissive amusement. The Zephyrian had been part of the Alliance for 400 years, and he never let anyone forget it. They see a crisis and immediately want to rush in with untested technology. This is exactly the kind of reckless thinking that makes them unsuitable for serious galactic responsibilities. Sarah felt her jaw tighten. She had heard variations of this speech countless times. Humans were too young, too impulsive, too eager to try new things. Never mind that human recklessness had solved problems that the Alliance had been struggling with for decades. Counselor THYSS, Sarah said, stepping forward to the speaking platform. Our quantum drive technology has been tested successfully in over 40 missions. We have the data to prove it works, and Dr. Webb's treatment has shown a 95% success rate in laboratory trials. We're not asking you to take our word for it. We're asking you to look at the evidence. The Corathian representative, a silicon-based life form that looked like a walking crystal formation, made a sound like grinding stone. Evidence from 40 small missions is not the same as evidence from one large mission. The quantum drive technology is still experimental. What happens if it fails while carrying critical medical supplies? What happens if your ships are lost in transit? What happens if we do nothing? Sarah shot back. The plague is spreading. Every day we delay, more people die. Our ships can reach the outer colonies in 5 days. Your ships will take 3 months. How many lives are worth your peace of mind? Counselor Velnara, the Velnari telepathic representative, spoke in her usual calm tone. Commander Chen, we understand your frustration, but galactic decisions cannot be made based on emotion. We must consider all possibilities, all risks. The Alliance has survived for 5 centuries because we move carefully and think through every decision. Sarah wanted to scream. The Velnari were telepathic, but they had learned to keep their thoughts to themselves around humans. Sarah often wondered what they really thought about her species. Probably nothing good, if their public statements were any indication. 5 centuries of careful thinking, Sarah said, trying to keep her voice level. And in all that time, how many crises have you solved? How many new technologies have you developed? How many new worlds have you explored? The chamber fell silent. It was a fair question, and everyone knew it. The Alliance had been remarkably stable for 500 years, but stability wasn't the same as progress. Most of the Alliance's technology was centuries old. Most of their trade routes had been established before humans even knew there was life beyond Earth. Admiral Kethvar, the Drachmoth military representative, spoke in his gravelly voice. Stability is not something to dismiss lightly. Human. Your species has been part of the Alliance for only 15 years. In that time, you have started 3 diplomatic incidents, introduced 17 new technologies without proper testing, and established colonies in 12 systems that we had marked as too dangerous for settlement. And how many of those colonies have failed? Sarah asked, how many of those technologies have caused disasters? How many of those diplomatic incidents turned into actual wars? The Admiral's silence was answer enough. Human colonies were thriving in systems where other species had given up. Human technology was being quietly adopted across the galaxy, even by species that publicly dismissed it as crude or dangerous. And human diplomats had actually prevented more wars than they had started. Dr. Marcus Webb, who had been sitting in the observer section, stood up. If I may, he said, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had spent his life solving impossible problems. The quantum drive technology is not experimental. It's revolutionary. There's a difference. We didn't develop it by accident. We developed it by approaching old problems in new ways. Counselor THYSS pulsed brighter. New ways that no one else has tried in 500 years. Perhaps there's a reason for that. Yes, Dr. Webb said with a slight smile. The reason is that everyone else was too afraid to try. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. No one spoke to the council like that. No one questioned the wisdom of species that had been traveling the stars since before humans had invented the wheel. Sarah felt a familiar surge of pride in her species. This was what made humans special. Not their technology, not their ships, not their weapons. It was their willingness to try impossible things, and their refusal to accept that something couldn't be done just because it had never been done before. Afraid, Counselor THYSS's energy form flared with anger. We are not afraid, human. We are wise. We are experienced. We understand the dangers of space travel in ways that your species cannot even comprehend. You have been playing with forces beyond your understanding for barely a decade and a half, and you think this makes you qualified to lecture species that have been mastering these forces for millennia? Mastering? Sarah stepped forward again. Is that what you call it? Because from where I stand, it looks like you've been hiding behind the same old solutions for so long that you've forgotten how to solve new problems. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah had crossed a line, and everyone knew it. But she was past caring about lines. She was tired of watching her species be treated like children while the galaxy burned around them. Counselor THYSS's form pulsed with cold fury. This is exactly what I am talking about. This is exactly why humans cannot be trusted with serious responsibilities. You are impulsive. You are arrogant. You are like children playing with forces beyond your comprehension, and you think your ignorance makes you clever. That was it. That was the moment Sarah Chun decided she was done. Children, she said, her voice cutting through the chamber like a blade, You want to know what children do, counselor? Children ask questions. Children try new things. Children aren't afraid to fail because they know that failure is how you learn. Children believe that impossible things might actually be possible if you just try hard enough. She turned to face the entire council, her voice growing stronger with each word. You know what adults do? Adults make excuses. Adults say that's the way we've always done it and think that's an argument. Adults are so afraid of being wrong that they'd rather watch people die than try something new. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the background hum of the station system seemed to have stopped. Sarah reached into her jacket and pulled out a small device. With a few quick gestures, she activated it, and her voice was suddenly being broadcast to every human ship and station in Alliance space. This is Commander Sarah Chun, Earth's representative to the Stellar Alliance Council. I am hereby announcing humanity's immediate withdrawal from the Alliance. All human personnel are to cease cooperation with Alliance operations and return to Earth space within 72 hours. All trade agreements are terminated. All military cooperation is suspended. All diplomatic relations are suspended. The council erupted in shocked voices, but Sarah wasn't finished. We came to the Alliance 15 years ago, hoping to find partners. We found parents who thought we needed to be managed. We came hoping to contribute to galactic civilization. We found a bureaucracy that was more interested in maintaining control than saving lives. We came hoping to be treated as equals. We found a hierarchy that valued age over ability and tradition over innovation. She paused, looking around the chamber at faces that showed a mixture of shock, anger, and something that might have been fear. The human species is done being treated like children. We're done asking permission to do the right thing. We're done waiting for approval to save lives. We're done being dismissed by species that have confused stagnation with wisdom. Sarah turned to walk away, then stopped and looked back at Counselor THYSS. Oh, and Counselor? We're taking our quantum drive technology with us, and our medical research, and our trade routes, and our military support, and our diplomatic services. Enjoy managing your next crisis with 500 years of experience and no new ideas. The chamber exploded in chaos as Sarah walked out, followed by Dr. Webb and the other human observers. Behind them, the Alliance Council was already beginning to realize what they had just lost. Within hours, human ships were departing from every Alliance facility. Human doctors were packing their research. Human engineers were shutting down their projects. Human diplomats were closing their embassies. The exodus was swift and efficient. Humans had learned from their history that when it was time to leave, you left quickly and you left completely. There was no point in half measures or gradual withdrawals. When you walked out, you walked out. Captain Elena Vasquez, commander of the human fleet in the Rigel sector, received Sarah's broadcast while she was in the middle of a joint training exercise with Alliance forces. Without hesitation, she ordered her ships to break formation and set course for Earth space. Captain, her Corathian counterpart called over the communication system. Where are you going? The exercise is not complete. The exercise is over, Elena replied. Permanently. Good luck with your next crisis. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Human merchants closed their shops. Human researchers packed their laboratories. Human peacekeepers abandoned their posts. Human traders canceled their contracts. The Alliance had thought humans were just another member species, useful but replaceable. They were about to learn how wrong they were. As the last human ship departed Alliance space, Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of her flagship, looking back at the council station growing smaller in the distance. She felt no satisfaction, only sadness. This wasn't what she had wanted. But sometimes, the only way to get respect was to walk away from those who refused to give it. Are we doing the right thing? Dr. Webb asked, joining her at the window. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Ask me in 6 months, she said finally, when they're dealing with their next crisis without us. We'll see if they still think we're just children playing with forces beyond our comprehension. Behind them, the Alliance Council was still in session, trying to figure out what had just happened. They would have their answers soon enough. The galaxy was about to learn what it was like without the humans who had been quietly holding it together. And for the first time in 500 years, the Alliance was going to have to solve a crisis without the species they had dismissed as too young, too reckless, and too inexperienced to matter. The plague was still spreading. The quantum drive technology was gone, and the clock was ticking. When the Foundation crumbles 2 months had passed since the humans walked out of the Stellar Alliance Council, and Counselor THYSS was beginning to understand the meaning of the ancient human phrase, "Be careful what you wish for." The Zephyrian energy being flickered with patterns of stress as he reviewed the daily crisis reports flooding his communication channels. The first sign of trouble had come within hours of the human departure. The quantum communication network that connected the far reaches of Alliance space to the central worlds had gone dark. For years, the Alliance had relied on human-maintained relay stations to carry messages across impossible distances in real time. Without human technicians to keep the quantum transmitters running, communication with outer colonies now took weeks instead of seconds. Admiral Kethvar materialized in THYSS's office chamber, his massive Drachmoth form barely fitting through the doorway. The warrior species had evolved on a high-gravity world, resulting in beings that looked like walking mountains of muscle and bone. But today, even the mighty Admiral looked tired. "The situation is getting worse," Kethvar growled, his voice like grinding stone. "We've lost contact with 17 outer colonies. The vegan sector is reporting pirate attacks, but our nearest patrol ships are 3 weeks away. The Corathian border is heating up again, and without human peacekeepers in the neutral zone, both sides are moving military assets into position." THYSS's energy form pulsed with frustrated orange light. "Surely our own forces can handle routine patrols and peacekeeping duties. We managed these responsibilities for centuries before humans arrived." "Did we?" Kethvar's eyes focused intently on the counselor. "When I review the records from before human involvement, I see a galaxy in constant low-level conflict. Border skirmishes, trade wars, resource disputes. The humans didn't just participate in our peacekeeping efforts, THYSS, they redesigned them. Their diplomatic approach prevented conflicts instead of just managing them." The Admiral pulled up a holographic display showing military deployments across Alliance base. Red zones indicated areas of conflict or high tension. 2 months ago, there had been 3 red zones. Now there were 14. The Andorian Collective and the Centauri Federation have resumed their border dispute, Kethvar continued. They've been fighting over those mining rights for 200 years. But human mediator Captain Jennifer Torres had gotten them to agree to joint development. Now that she's gone, they're mobilizing battle fleets. THYSS dimmed with confusion. One human mediator was preventing a war between 2 major powers, not preventing, solving. She didn't just keep them from fighting. She found a way for both sides to get what they wanted. That's what humans do, THYSS. They don't manage problems. They solve them. Before THYSS could respond, an urgent communication burst through their conversation. Dr. Zilnara, the Velnari telepathic representative, appeared as a shimmering hologram. Her usually calm mental emanations were chaotic with panic. "Emergency council session," she said, her telepathic voice carrying undertones of desperation that made both THYSS and Kethvar uncomfortable. "The plague has reached the core worlds. Zephyrian Prime reported its first cases this morning. We need Dr. Webb's treatment protocols immediately." The 3 council members rushed to the emergency chamber where the other representatives were already gathering. The chamber that had once buzzed with confident authority now felt like a hospital waiting room. Everyone was scared, and no one wanted to admit it. Counselor Velterra, the senior Corathian representative, spoke first. Her crystalline form was flickering with stress patterns. "The plague has mutated. Our medical teams report that it's spreading faster than before and affecting species that were previously immune. We have perhaps days before it reaches critical population centers." "What about our own medical research?" asked THYSS. "Surely our doctors can develop treatments based on the human data." Dr. Zilnara's mental projection wavered. We tried. The human research was more advanced than we realized. Dr. Webb wasn't just developing a cure. He was working with principles of genetic medicine that our scientists don't fully understand. His treatment protocols assume knowledge and technology that we don't have. The silence that followed was deafening. For 500 years, the Alliance had prided itself on its advanced medical knowledge. The idea that a species barely 2 decades into galactic civilization had medical technology beyond their understanding was almost impossible to accept. What about our quantum drive research? Kethvar asked, can we reach the human colonies independently? Velterra's crystalline form darkened. Our preliminary studies suggest that quantum drive technology violates several fundamental principles of physics as we understand them. Human scientists appear to have approached the problem from a completely different theoretical framework. Our physicists estimate it would take us 50 to 70 years to develop equivalent technology. 50 years, THYSS repeated, his energy form fluctuating wildly. The plague will have consumed the galaxy 50 times over by then. Another emergency signal interrupted the meeting. The holographic image of Governor Karthak from the Rigel Colonial Authority appeared in the chamber. The massive Drachmoth looked haggard, his usual military bearing replaced by desperate exhaustion. Council members, he said without preamble, I'm formally requesting immediate humanitarian assistance. The Rigel colonies are in complete chaos. Without human cargo ships running supplies, we're facing critical shortages of everything from food to medical supplies to basic manufacturing components. THYSS pulsed with confusion. Surely the local production facilities can meet basic needs. Governor Karthak's laugh was bitter. Local production? Counselor, 60% of our manufacturing equipment was designed and built by human engineers. Another 30% uses human-developed technologies. Without human technicians to maintain the systems, our production capacity has dropped by 80%. The governor's image flickered as his communication systems struggled with the overloaded networks. It's not just the Rigel colonies, either. I'm getting reports from across the Alliance. Human-designed infrastructure is failing everywhere, and no one knows how to fix it. Dr. Zilnara's telepathic emanations carried waves of realization and horror. We never noticed how much we depended on them, she said, quietly. Humans integrated their technology and expertise so seamlessly into our civilization that we forgot it wasn't originally ours. The truth was becoming impossible to ignore. Humans hadn't just been participants in Alliance civilization. They had been the backbone holding it together. Their innovations in communication, transportation, medicine, and manufacturing had become so fundamental to daily life that their absence was causing everything to collapse. There has to be something we can do, THYSS insisted. We are ancient civilizations with vast experience and knowledge. Surely we can adapt to function without one species that has only been here for 15 years. Velterra's crystalline form began displaying data streams. I've been analyzing our civilization's development over the past 15 years. Since human integration, our technological advancement rate increased by 400%. Our economic growth increased by 200%. Interspecies conflicts decreased by 60%. Population growth and quality of life improvements across all member species increased dramatically. She paused, the weight of the data evident in her voice. We thought we were graciously allowing humans to participate in our advanced civilization. In reality, they were dragging us forward into theirs. The emergency session was interrupted by another crisis alert. This time it was from the Korathian border worlds. The holographic image showed a massive Korathian battle fleet facing off against equally massive Drachmoth forces. This is Fleet Commander Zel Tar, the Korathian officer announced. The Drachmoth Empire has violated the Neutral Zone Agreement. We are responding with appropriate force. Before anyone could respond, a Drachmoth admiral appeared on another channel. The Korathians have been secretly mining in disputed territory for months. We demand immediate cessation of illegal activities and full reparations. THYSS watched in horror as two of the Alliance's founding species prepared for war. Counselors, please, we can resolve this through diplomatic channels. What diplomatic channels? Demanded the Korathian commander. The human mediators who usually handle these situations are gone. The neutral zones they established are no longer being maintained. The early warning systems they set up have been offline for weeks. The Drachmoth Admiral's image flickered with static. The humans didn't just mediate our disputes, Zephyrian. They prevented them. Their early detection systems identified potential conflicts before they became serious. Their economic incentive programs gave us better options than fighting. Their cultural exchange programs helped us understand each other. We demand immediate council intervention, the Korathian commander stated. If the Alliance cannot maintain peace and order, then individual species must protect their own interests. The transmission ended, leaving the council staring at empty air. Within hours, the first shots were fired in what would become known as the Korathian-Drachmoth border war. It was the first major conflict between Alliance members in over 2 centuries, but the military crisis was just the beginning. The economic collapse accelerated as trade routes established and maintained by human merchants shut down. Entire sectors found themselves cut off from essential goods. Planets that had relied on human agricultural techniques faced food shortages. Space stations that used human-designed life support systems began experiencing critical failures. Dr. Zilnara spent sleepless days trying to coordinate the Alliance's response to cascading crises. Her telepathic abilities, normally a source of calm and insight, were overwhelmed by the panic and desperation radiating from populations across the galaxy. The Velnari collective consciousness is fragmenting, she reported during another emergency session. Our people are experiencing unprecedented levels of stress and confusion. The mental networks that have connected our civilization for millennia are breaking down under the weight of galactic chaos. Even worse, other species were beginning to question the Alliance's competence. The Korathian rebellion had inspired independence movements on dozens of worlds. Species that had been loyal Alliance members for centuries were suddenly demanding self-governance. The Centauri Federation is threatening to withdraw, reported Admiral Kethvar. They say the Alliance has proven itself incapable of maintaining basic order and security. The Andorian Collective is making similar noises. If we lose 2 more major members, the Alliance itself could collapse. THYSS felt something he had never experienced in his 400-year lifespan. Genuine fear. Not fear of death or injury, but fear of complete civilizational failure. The Alliance had survived wars, plagues, economic collapses, and natural disasters, but it had never faced the sudden removal of the species that had unknowingly become its foundation. We have to contact Earth, Velterra said, finally. We have to ask the humans to return. The words hung in the chamber like a physical weight. For species that had viewed themselves as the galaxy's elder statesmen, the idea of asking for help from the children they had dismissed was almost unbearable. They'll never agree, THYSS said quietly. After the way we treated them, after the things we said, they'll have terms, Kethvar added grimly. Humans don't forget insults, and they don't forgive easily. Dr. Zilnara's telepathic emanations carried a mix of hope and desperation. Then we give them whatever terms they want. Because the alternative is watching our civilization collapse into chaos and war. The first delegation to Earth departed 3 days later. It was the most humiliating mission in Alliance history, and everyone knew it. But as reports continued to pour in of spreading plague, escalating conflicts, and systemic failures across the galaxy, pride seemed like a luxury they could no longer afford. The Alliance had learned too late that wisdom didn't always come with age, and that sometimes the youngest voice in a room was also the most important. Now, they had to hope that the humans they had dismissed as reckless children would be generous enough to save them from the consequences of their own arrogance. earning back trust 6 months after humanity's dramatic departure from the Stellar Alliance. President Maria Santos stood in her office overlooking the bustling spaceport of New Geneva on Luna. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see a steady stream of ships arriving and departing. But these weren't Alliance vessels. These were ships from the dozens of species that had chosen to leave the Alliance and join what galactic media was calling the human sphere. The irony wasn't lost on her. While the Alliance crumbled, humanity was building something new, something better, something based on mutual respect rather than ancient hierarchies. Madam President, her aide announced, the Alliance delegation has arrived. Maria turned from the window, straightening her shoulders. She had been expecting this visit for months. The reports from Alliance Base were impossible to ignore. Economic collapse, spreading plague, escalating conflicts, and massive refugee movements. The galaxy's oldest civilization was falling apart, and they needed help. The delegation that entered her office was a shadow of the proud council that had once dismissed humanity as too young and inexperienced to matter. Counselor THYSS's energy form flickered with patterns Maria had learned to recognize as exhaustion and desperation. His usual bright confidence had dimmed to a tired orange glow. Beside him, the ancient Counselor Kelverith moved slowly, his crystalline form showing stress fractures that hadn't been there 6 months ago. Admiral Kethvar looked like he hadn't slept in weeks, his massive frame somehow diminished by the weight of responsibility, but it was Dr. Zilnara who looked the worst. The telepathic Velnari was struggling to maintain her mental shields, and Maria could sense waves of anxiety and desperation radiating from her direction. President Santos, THYSS began formally, his voice lacking its usual condescending tone. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. Maria gestured to the chairs arranged around her conference table. Please sit, though I should mention that Commander Sarah Chun will be joining us shortly. As Secretary of Defense, she'll need to be part of any serious discussions. The Alliance delegates exchanged uncomfortable glances. Sarah Chun had become something of a legend in the months since her dramatic walkout. Her speech to the Council had been broadcast across the galaxy, inspiring independence movements and reform efforts on dozens of worlds. Of course, THYSS said quietly, We owe Commander Chin an apology. We owe your entire species an apology. Before Maria could respond, Sarah entered the room. She wore the uniform of Earth's Defense Forces, her commander's insignia replaced by the stars of a full admiral. The promotion had been Maria's idea. If they were going to rebuild humanity's place in the galaxy, they needed leaders with the rank to be taken seriously. Sarah took her seat without ceremony, her expression neutral but alert. Counselor THYSS, she said with a slight nod. I trust your journey from Alliance Base was enlightening. THYSS's energy form pulsed with what might have been embarrassment. Admiral Chun, I want to begin by saying that the Council's previous assessment of human capabilities was incomplete. Incomplete, Sarah repeated, tasting the word. That's an interesting choice of words. Dr. Zilnara leaned forward, her telepathic voice carrying undertones of genuine remorse. Admiral, we were wrong. Completely catastrophically wrong. We let our prejudices blind us to the truth about human contributions to galactic civilization. And what truth is that? Maria asked, her tone carefully neutral. Admiral Kethvar spoke up, his gravelly voice carrying a weight of bitter experience. That you weren't just participants in our civilization. You were the foundation holding it together. Your innovations, your solutions, your approaches to problems we'd given up on, they became so integrated into our daily lives that we forgot they weren't originally ours. Sarah exchanged a glance with President Santos. They had expected this admission, but hearing it spoken aloud by the species that had once dismissed them as children was still satisfying. The plague has reached our core worlds, THYSS continued. Zephyrian Prime, Corathian Central, even the Velnari homeworld. Our medical teams can't replicate Dr. Webb's treatment protocols. We don't understand the theoretical framework his research was based on. Millions are dying, Dr. Zilnara added. her mental emanations carrying waves of genuine anguish. And we can't reach the outer colonies where the plague started because we can't replicate your quantum drive technology. Sarah felt a familiar surge of anger, but also something else. Sadness. These beings were suffering, and despite everything they had said and done, she took no pleasure in their pain. So, you've come to ask the reckless children to clean up the mess the wise adults couldn't handle, Sarah said. But her tone was more tired than bitter. We've come to ask our equals for help, THYSS said quietly. Partners we should have recognized from the beginning. President Santos leaned back in her chair, studying the delegation. That's a nice sentiment, counselor. But words are easy. What are you actually offering? Kelverith, who had been silent until now, spoke in a voice that carried the weight of millennia, complete restructuring of the alliance, equal representation for all member species regardless of age or size, rotating leadership positions, formal recognition of human contributions to galactic civilization, full partnership in all major decisions, and, Sarah prompted, and formal apology to the human species for the Council's previous behavior, THYSS added, his energy form dimming with shame. Public acknowledgement that our assessment of human capabilities was based on prejudice rather than evidence. Maria and Sarah exchanged another look. It was more than they had expected, but less than they would demand. That's a good start, Maria said finally, but the alliance is broken. Even if we agreed to rejoin, what exactly would we be rejoining? Half your member species have declared independence. Your communication networks are down. Your trade routes are collapsed. Your peacekeeping forces are fighting each other instead of maintaining order. Then help us rebuild, Dr. Zilnara pleaded. Help us create something better than what we had before. Sarah stood and walked to the window, looking out at the busy spaceport. Human ships worked alongside vessels from dozens of other species, former alliance members who had chosen cooperation over hierarchy. We're already building something better, she said without turning around. The human sphere isn't trying to recreate the alliance. We're trying to create something new, something based on mutual respect and shared innovation rather than ancient privileges and rigid hierarchies. She turned back to face the delegation. The Korathians who left the Alliance aren't our subjects or our juniors. They're our partners. The Centauri refugees who asked for sanctuary aren't our dependents. They're our colleagues. The vegan scientists working in our research stations aren't learning from their superiors. They're collaborating with their equals. Admiral Kethvar's eyes showed something that might have been envy. The reports we've received suggest that human sphere worlds are more prosperous and peaceful than Alliance territories. Because we solve problems instead of managing them, Sarah replied. Because we encourage innovation instead of fearing it. Because we judge ideas on their merit, not on who suggests them. THYSS pulsed with desperate hope. Then teach us. Show us how to be better. The room fell silent. This was the moment Maria and Sarah had been preparing for. They had known this request would come eventually, and they had spent months deciding how to respond. There are conditions, Maria said finally, non-negotiable conditions. Name them, Kelverith said immediately. First, complete dissolution of the current alliance structure. No grandfathered privileges for founding species. No special status based on age or size. Everyone starts equal. Agreed, THYSS said without hesitation. Second, the new organization will be called the Galactic Confederation, and it will operate on principles of rotating leadership, shared decision-making, and merit-based advancement. Agreed. Third, humanity will hold the position of Secretary General for the first term, with Admiral Chun as our representative. The Alliance delegates looked at each other. Making the human who had walked out on them the leader of their new organization was a bitter pill to swallow, but they were past having pride. Agreed, Dr. Zilnara said. Fourth, immediate access to all Alliance scientific databases, military intelligence, and diplomatic archives. If we're going to fix this mess, we need to understand how bad it really is. Agreed. Sarah stepped forward. And fifth, before we help anyone else, we deal with the plague. Dr. Webb's research teams get full access to Alliance medical facilities and complete cooperation from all member species. No bureaucracy, no committees, no delays. Of course, THYSS said eagerly, "When can we begin?" Maria smiled for the first time since the meeting began. Dr. Webb's medical ships launched for the outer colonies 3 hours ago. They should reach the plague-affected areas within the week. The Alliance delegates stared at her in shock. You were already mobilizing assistance?" Dr. Zilnara asked. "We've been monitoring the situation for months," Sarah explained. "We're not monsters, counselors. We knew people were dying. We just weren't going to help while being treated like junior partners." "But the quantum drive ships?" Admiral Kethvar asked. "How did you solve the transportation problem?" Sarah's smile was slight, but satisfied. Dr. Webb didn't stop innovating when we left the Alliance. His new quantum drive systems are twice as fast and 3 times more reliable than the ones you dismissed as too experimental. We can have medical supplies and personnel anywhere in the galaxy within days. The next few hours were a whirlwind of planning and coordination. Communication channels were established between Earth and Alliance space. Medical protocols were shared. Supply schedules were coordinated. For the first time in months, there was hope in the galaxy. 3 weeks later, Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the medical ship UES Nightingale as it approached Zephyrian Prime. The planet that had once been the shining capital of Alliance Base was now a world under quarantine, its energy-based population suffering from a plague they couldn't understand or treat. "Medical teams are ready for deployment," reported Dr. Webb from the ship's medical bay. "The new treatment protocols should be effective against all known variants of the plague." Sarah watched as dozens of ships from the human sphere converged on the infected world. Human medical vessels, Corathian research ships, Centauri hospital ships, and vessels from a dozen other species working together to save lives. "Begin medical deployment," she ordered. "All teams. Remember, we're not just treating a disease today. We're proving that cooperation works better than hierarchy." The mission was a complete success. Within days, the plague was contained. Within weeks, it was eliminated. The treatment protocols developed by human scientists working with their alien colleagues proved effective against every variant of the disease. But more importantly, the joint mission became a symbol of what the new Galactic Confederation could achieve. Species that had barely spoken to each other for centuries found themselves working side by side, sharing knowledge and resources to solve problems that none could handle alone. 6 months later, Secretary General Sarah Chun stood before the first session of the Galactic Confederation Assembly. The new organization included not just the reformed Alliance members, but dozens of species that had never been part of the old system. The Assembly met on a new space station built jointly by member species using the best technologies and ideas from across the galaxy. "1 year ago," Sarah began, her voice carrying to representatives from over 100 different species, "I walked out of an Alliance Council meeting because I was tired of humanity being treated like children. Today, I stand before you not as a human leader, but as the elected representative of a confederation that values all voices, all ideas, and all contributions." She paused, looking out at the diverse assembly. The old Alliance believed that age brought wisdom, that tradition was more valuable than innovation, that stability required hierarchy. They were wrong on all counts. True wisdom comes from listening to new ideas, not dismissing them. True progress comes from building on tradition while remaining open to change. True stability comes from addressing problems honestly, not managing them indefinitely. The Assembly listened in respectful silence. These weren't the forced courtesies of the old Alliance, but genuine attention earned through demonstrated competence. "The Galactic Confederation isn't perfect," Sarah continued. "We will make mistakes. We will face challenges. We will sometimes disagree on the best path forward. But we will face these challenges together as equals with respect for each other's contributions and faith in our ability to find solutions." She looked directly at the section where the former Alliance leaders sat. THYSS Kelverith, Kethvar, and Zilnara had all been elected to positions in the new government, but as representatives of their species rather than hereditary rulers. A wise Zephyrian once told me that humans were like children playing with forces beyond their comprehension, Sarah said with a slight smile. He was right in a way. We are like children. We ask questions that adults think they already know the answers to. We try things that adults say are impossible. We believe that problems exist to be solved, not managed. Today, I want to thank that Zephyrian for teaching me something important. The galaxy needs its children. It needs species willing to ask uncomfortable questions, try impossible things, and believe that tomorrow can be better than today. But the galaxy also needs its adults. It needs the wisdom of experience, the stability of proven methods, and the knowledge accumulated over millennia. The Confederation works because we've learned to value both youth and age, innovation and tradition, courage and caution. The assembly erupted in applause. Not the polite acknowledgement of the old alliance, but genuine enthusiasm from beings who had seen what cooperation could accomplish. As Sarah concluded her speech, and the assembly moved on to other business, she reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. Humanity had walked out of galactic civilization to prove they deserved respect. They had walked back in to help build something better than what came before. The galaxy was more prosperous, more peaceful, and more innovative than it had ever been. Species that had been enemies for centuries now worked together on joint projects. Technologies that had stagnated for millennia were advancing rapidly as fresh perspectives challenged old assumptions. Most importantly, no species, no matter how young or old, large or small, was dismissed as too inexperienced to contribute. Every voice was heard, every idea was considered, and every being was treated with the dignity they deserved. That IT had taken a crisis to teach the galaxy that wisdom could come from unexpected sources, that sometimes the youngest voice in a room had the most important things to say, and that the future belonged to those brave enough to build it together. The humans had walked out to demand respect. They had returned to create a galaxy where respect was given freely, earned through action, and shared by all.